Our hope for this program is to facilitate a public dialogue about complex education issues so that our viewers are informed and prepared to actively participate in making their family's education experience successful. A key element has been to welcome to the program guests who are educators and who share with our audience their expertise, insight, and opinions. Like other professionals in society, educators have been trained in their respective fields and are active in its practice as well as its evolution. On today's program, we turn the focus to a discussion about educators, their motivation, their values, and their unique place in society. We welcome to this dialogue Professor Paul Orlowski, former Vancouver teacher and current head of teacher education at the University of the Fraser Valley. I'm Paul Shaker, and this is An Education Matter. Paul, I thought in today's program we'd use our own case studies or career histories as an exploration in careers in education to give our audience a better idea of the different pathways people follow in our field and the rewards and the frustrations that follow too. Also to give people who are considering education as a possible career for themselves a more accurate idea of what a career in education is like. I know from talking with you in other venues that you've had a relatively unusual career pathway yourself. So would you start off by picking up at college and taking us through the early stages of your career in education?
Sure. Yeah, it is a kind of a circuitous route I took to become a high school teacher in Vancouver. I did an engineering degree at Carleton University in Ottawa, and although many people wouldn't think that an engineering program is a place where one can get politicized, that's what happened to me. There were a few events that took place in my four-year program of engineering that where I raised my eyebrows and questioned the values that were being taught to us. For instance, I can remember on one course on energy, fourth-year course actually, and the professor asked us to come up with a solution to this problem. We were all apparently in this simulation engineers for Inco, which is a big nickel producer in Sudbury, and he said, look, the government is going to check the sulfur dioxide being emitted from the smokestacks of Inco. And what would we do? I remember putting up my hand and saying, well, we'll use a filter. This, by the way, sulfur dioxide causes acid rain. And he said, too expensive. And another person had this solution and that solution. And he said, no, I wouldn't hire any of you. You're all useless as engineers. And this is on the verge of our graduation from the program. And he said, you just if he had explained the test that the government was going to use, that a kilometer away from each smokestack they were going to check the concentration of sulfur dioxide, and he said, you just make the smokestack higher, which will decrease the concentration and, you know, ostensibly destroy a larger area around the Inco smokestacks. And that's indicative of what started to happen in my head of something's amiss here. And actually, coming out of engineering, I think I developed a strong environmentalist perspective, and that's what led me into teaching, was kind of a green orientation. Yeah.
Well, was Vancouver the first place that you taught?
No, it wasn't. I taught in Bella Coola up in northern BC. I did my one-year teacher program after engineering at UBC, knowing that wherever you do it, in whatever province you do your teacher ed program, that's the province you're most likely to work in. And I'd been to British Columbia a few times. I'm actually from Toronto, but I thought this is where I wanted to do my adult life and my teaching career. And there were a few reasons for that, and one of them was the politics. I found British Columbia politics quite interesting in terms of, you know, it was basically a two-party system, one for corporations and one for the common person, the working classes, if you will. And so I purposefully picked UBC so that I could be a teacher in British Columbia. It was only 4 months maternity leave in Bella Coola. Interesting place, though. Then down to Squamish for 4 years, and where I taught at Howe Sound Secondary, and then over in the British Columbia system for 14 years.
Now, what about the role of your family in this decision? Were they in education? Were they encouraging you to be a teacher?
No, far from that. My father was a chartered accountant, and I used to talk about being a teacher even in my engineering program, and he was highly opposed, actually thought teachers would become redundant, you know, in that sense, seemed to be affected by the craze around the Sputnik and technology, and we all should focus on math and science, and so he actually strongly encouraged me to be an engineer, and interestingly, even while I was doing engineering, I thought, I'll do this for Dad, but maybe I will make that turn, and things like what I just described with the energy course spurred me on to become a teacher, and I'm the first teacher in my family history.
I wanted to point that out because the parents have a big influence in this, and sometimes it goes by culture too. In your case, I don't know that it was that way, but I felt this in my own family, that it wasn't approved of to go into education. It wasn't thought to be an adequate career, especially for a man. So one of the reasons I'm having us talk about this in this program is to show that some normal people who have had middle-class lives have gone into teaching and found enough of a livelihood as well as a good career to satisfy them. But I went into education because of the draft initially. I was in graduate school to become a professor, and I had a choice of coming to Canada, getting drafted, going to jail, or becoming a teacher. And out of those options, I took at that time becoming a teacher. Now I've ended up coming to Canada as well. And when I got into teaching, my father told me it was a terrible waste. Mm-hmm. So that idea is out there, and one of the reasons I wanted to surface this is because if your child has a vocation to be a teacher, mm-hmm. you shouldn't stand in their way. And if your fear is that they'll never make a living, or that it's a career without any career ladder or opportunity to evolve, that's not true either, and we'll of course get into that as we talk further.
Sure, and you're exactly right. There's a lot of options that I wasn't aware of even when I did the teacher ed program 25 years ago at UBC, but there are all sorts of options for teachers, all sorts of locations to do their work and the different types of work. It's actually quite fascinating, especially when you consider the demographics of the students that you might, if you want to work with underprivileged students, people who may be considered part of the so-called underclass from families where they don't have a full-time worker perhaps. That's fascinating work too. Or you can, all the backgrounds. I mean, I've taught in alternative programs, mainstream schools, Aboriginal programs, West Side, middle to upper middle class schools, working class schools on the east side.
Now, a lot of this was in Vancouver.
Yeah.
So you come from Squamish to Vancouver.
Right.
And then trace your career in Vancouver for us.
Yeah, in Vancouver I did start in an alternative program at Van Tech, and I was the earth science math teacher there. And interestingly enough, as I'm talking about things like destruction of the ozone layer and acid rain and global warming, even back then global warming, now it's caught on, but back then it wasn't so prevalent. But I was discovering students in some of the classes, I was surprised at the level of poverty. They didn't have food at home. And that kind of woke me up in that sense. That's why I said I came into education with a green orientation rather than concerns for working class families. Through teaching, became even more politicized and developed a political consciousness after engaging with the students in my classes and realizing just how deep poverty ran in, in that case in the East Vancouver locale, but we all know that this happens across
So I hear
Canada.
you saying you went from a green emphasis to a kind of social democratic emphasis,
right.
Because to do your job properly, you recognized that your students had to have the necessities of life.
I agree. The destruction of the ozone was a little too abstract for people who didn't have food in their fridge at home, that kind of thing. So I started teaching in the social studies department. Actually, that did happen in Squamish before I came to Vancouver with the department head of social studies. He and I were always engaged in the lunchroom, and the other teachers just sit back and enjoy the show. And as we argued the merits of the free trade deals, which were big in Canada in '87, '88, toward the end of Mulroney's first term as Prime Minister. But to his credit, at the end of the year, there were 2 Social Studies 11 courses there. I'd never taught social studies. And he said to the principal, ask Orlowski, because he seems to be born to talk about these kinds of issues. I did that, and that was great. When I came to Vancouver, there were more openings coming up in Aboriginal Studies, First Nation Studies 12, Civic Studies 11 a little later on. I was often at the, I was the first teacher in both of those courses to teach them in Vancouver, and I ended up teaching a lot of social studies as well.
You're a rather political person with strong views, Paul. I wondered, did that ever cause you a problem with people in the community, your administrators or school boards?
But I know that's a common teacher concern, that there'll be a backlash from colleagues or administrators or parents especially about what they may be teaching if they come from sort of a critical left perspective. But I've always felt that there's prescribed learning outcomes in every curriculum in social studies to protect a teacher. You know, there might be something as innocuous as teach issues from multiple perspectives. Well, that's enough. And if you get called into the principal's office because there may be a room full of parents, and I haven't had this, but some of my former student teachers tell me these stories, you bring in the curriculum, you point to the PLO where this is okay to do, this is prescribed, and you can protect yourself that way if you know the IRP or the curriculum well enough.
Well, that's not a small thing, and I think we should pause for a moment on that and celebrate the tolerance and diversity of British Columbia for having a system that has allowed you to have a career like that and to witness that sort of freedom of expression in the classroom, and to have standards such as those that defended your right to express yourself according to your conscience and your values. Really isn't to be taken for granted, I think.
I agree. Squamish is not as conservative as many places in British Columbia. I would say a lot of the administrators I've come across are liberal in their orientation to society and are very strong advocates for public education themselves. So if I wanted to take the view of suggesting to people come to an anti-war rally and another person takes the other view, they don't have to come. It's a democracy. I've always been impressed. I wasn't as a child. I didn't know what protest really meant growing up in Canada with immigrant parents and the Vietnam protests that sometimes would spill over into Toronto. I didn't understand at the time that protest is actually a sign of a healthy democracy, nonviolent civil disobedience, of course. And I've come to learn that actually, you know, in my own social studies teaching, I push for that. And yeah, I appreciate that Canada, British Columbia in particular, but Canada in general allows for that kind of expression of dissent.
Okay, thank you. We'll be back in a moment.
For more than 40 years, the Faculty of Education at SFU has been delivering academic programs that are innovative and responsive. Based on the academic research of our professors and the expertise of practicing teachers from your communities, our programs are designed to meet classroom needs. As a community, we're piecing together a successful education experience for students today and in the future.
Paul Orlowski is our guest today. Paul, you had what I consider to be a successful and interesting career as a teacher, and then you went on to graduate school. Would you take us from your joining graduate school to the career you're in today?
Sure. One of the reasons I went into graduate school, Paul, was because first of all, I went into teaching for some kind of political consciousness raising with students, as I said earlier, around green issues, but then that changed and encompassed more social and economic issues. But I had many conversations with my colleagues, teachers, you know, hard-working people. And by the way, I want to say I've always been proud to be a teacher and proud to be part of the teaching profession and a member of the BCTF. All of that is important to me. Yet I did find that it wasn't just students coming in without a political consciousness. To some degree, it was too significant a percentage of teachers I felt that were somewhat apolitical, and that pushed me into going into teacher education. And it was, if I got into if I was successful with political consciousness raising, and maybe to some degree I feel I was, if I may say that, with students, maybe the same thing would happen with student teachers who could then have their own classroom, and I just felt it was more efficient that way. And it was important to me, and that was a motivation for me to go into teaching and into teacher education.
My motivation was similar. I wanted to try to affect the system at a higher level, so that I could leverage whole institutions or the teacher corps or the way education policy was made. I had the same motivation. I never wanted to leave education, But one of the limitations of teaching, I don't know if you'll agree with me or not, is that your audience is always the students and only the students. So no matter how much you do or what you do, it can't project beyond the classroom directly.
That's right.
So at a point, I wanted to try to get that projection into the larger society, doing things like this program, for example.
For sure, and the books you've written and the articles.
So as you're preparing these new teachers now in your current job, well, to take the story forward, you finished graduate school at UBC.
Yes, I did, and was a sessional instructor there for a little while, but then this position came up in the Fraser Valley. They wanted to start a brand new teacher education program with a social justice focus. That was close to Vancouver. I thought this was perfect, applied for it and got it, and have been there for almost 3 years now. And you know, I think this program is coming out successful. There is a little bit of research being done by some sociology professors to see if, in fact, the students are coming out with more of a social justice consciousness than when they went into the program. And I'll be interested to read the results of that study, which probably will be toward the end of 2009.
So as you're now a teacher educator, thinking about the world of education that your students are going out into, what would you like to see change so that they're able to do their job in the best possible fashion? What do you hope for them as they become teachers?
Well, besides the you know, the structural issues of smaller class sizes and things like that, I think that's important. I like the number 25. Research shows that that's a good number for effective learning compared to 35, where some classes in British Columbia have now. But I actually, you know, there was an article by Lawrence Martin in the Globe and Mail in 2003 saying it's the article title was something along the lines of it's not the Canadian public who have gone to their right, just the media. Well, that, in effect, it started me thinking about the Canadian public get their information, they hear the discourses that bombard them from the media, and where's another source? Well, really, I think the school is a second, you know. But so I figure even if people wanted to maintain the status quo, the public education system should move a little, should at least explain things from a more progressive point of view, or even critical point of view, than if the media is moving to the right, like Lawrence Martin contends, and I tend to think so too. So I would like to see teachers, high school teachers, but even elementary teachers have some understanding of critical media literacy, the role of the media, and how teachers can combat that, not just in terms of education, but in all the discourses, in terms of social class issues, race, gender issues, sexuality issues. I would like the teachers to be able to deconstruct the media discourses and teach their students to do the same. I do feel, I actually sometimes lament the Canadian and American situation, because when I meet European teenagers, they're very politically aware. They know, they understand what, say, social democracy means, liberalism, conservatism. Here in North America, maybe there's some discussion that can go along the lines of distinguishing liberals from conservatives. We've seen that in the U.S. with what George Bush was saying in those 8 years. But still, I do feel it's a lacking kind of discussion that happens here. So I would like to see the teaching force get a little deeper into ideology critique, critical media literacy, and I hope they're able to do that. There is a little bit of room for media literacy in the social studies curriculum. They call for it. They do in Ontario as well.
Let me play devil's advocate and turn the lens back on ourselves as educators. To what extent are we resistant to change? Are the critics correct when they say we close ranks and protect ourselves too much, that tenure is too strong, that we resist rightful accountability? Let's be self-critical for a moment, and if you could change our own perspective within our own organizations, what would you address?
Okay, for instance, those the union here, BCTF, takes a strong stand against the FSA tests. I can see why. They're just testing sort of surface level information and knowledge. They're not going deep. At the same time, the public is calling for some kind of accountability. That whatever, they're worried about if their child goes to a school where the teachers didn't follow the curriculum, they might not get into university or something like this. I would like to see a compromise between the two positions on FSAs, and I don't even know if you've heard this, if we've talked about this before, Paul. I do feel that maybe the FSA test should cover 60% of the year, and which allows enough time for the teachers to do, say, improve the enacted curriculum, which is the interests of the students in the classroom and the passions of the students, the passion of the teachers. And they can get deeply involved in all sorts of projects, you know, maybe active citizenry, you know, one of those things that every social studies curriculum calls for, you know, strengthen democracy and citizenship, this kind of thing. Well, part of that is participating in a democracy, not just voting. Yeah, so just to wind that up, that's, I would like to see the school system, I'd like to see the teaching force address that. And
yeah, I understand. Well, one of the problems I think we have from a democratic theory point of view is the dialogue doesn't take place among all the stakeholders to move us off some of these blockages.
Well said.
And we know that our group, the Deans of Education, the universities, we're not a part of the roundtable, and so our voice is missing from that venue for dialogue, whether it's succeeded among the other stakeholders or not. We were absent from it, and
right.
I think we feel we had a solid contribution to make. In addition to the fact that we may have some expertise, we certainly have an international perspective, because more than most people in the stakeholders at large, we come from all over the world and we go to meetings all over the world, and there's quite an awareness of alternatives from a comparative education point of view.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It was interesting in the first few years of the present provincial government when they came in 2001. They didn't, they were more interested in listening to the views of school trustees and parents, both groups very important. Their views are important, but they were not coming to the ABCDE, and these are people who have studied. We all had either PhDs or ed doctorates and have studied all aspects of education. Things are changing a little bit in on that front, though. There's a little bit more opening for the views of ABCDE.
And reflecting on the sorts of things you've said today, I would hypothesize that education, like other human service professions such as social work and nursing, provide a place for people to work who want to have a career that's filled more with human meaning than the pursuit of economic advancement. And I think that puts people in those fields a bit out of the mainstream. It's not a criticism of other people if they want their goals to be primarily economic, but I think it leads to misunderstanding of people who seek these other careers, and creates a danger that society may not attract the best people, the most suited people to those roles, because we need people in these human service professions. So as I hear you speak, I don't hear much about the economic side of your whole career, and I hear a great deal about what I would call the meaning side, or the symbolic side, the service aspect of your career. I wonder if you resonate at all with this sort of analysis.
Oh, definitely. Teaching is, I feel, one of the most important professions in our society, and also one of the most rewarding. And I can tell that, you know, as I'm in my 50s now, talking to people I grew up with, and some went into business, and you know, they're doing a lot better than me, maybe economically. But in terms of meaningful rewards, meaningful work, you know, we spend a lot of time working every week. I feel teaching has, you know, it's been very good for me and very good for my my self-esteem, my soul, whatever. I feel it's an enriching experience. I can take a bus in Vancouver, and it's like a really interesting film I'm watching, just by seeing how children of other cultures, how they interact with their elders. And you know, everything's an anthropological or sociological film now, and that's because teaching has kind of given me that eye to look at the social relations out there in a new way that I don't know if I went and, say, did what my father did, a chartered accountant or an engineer, if I'd have that same perspective. And the experience of being a teacher for so long helped develop that, and I'm very grateful.
Yeah. My father was an accountant also, just for the record,
Okay.
and a business person, a developer. I think we become numb sometimes in education to all the meaning that's generated around us by our work. And I don't think we think much about it pro or con. It's just so much a part of our lives. But when you compare sometimes with friends or family who work in fields that don't yield much meaning, who have to act sometimes in hypocritical ways in order to make a living, then it comes to mind, you know, that it's a blessing. And it's certainly worth something on the bottom line of the paycheck.
Yeah.
Some psychic value there, a great deal of psychic value.
I agree with you.
So, in sum, I wonder if there's any elements of your vision for what we're trying to accomplish in public education that we've left out of this discussion. You talked about the schools you'd like to see your students head into, but is there anything else about the arrangements around schools
Well, I'd like the public, I think the public is quite aware. In the the stoppage in the fall of 2005, the polls were showing more support for the teachers rather than the provincial government, who wanted to impose yet one more contract on teachers. And that's interesting, yet I would like to think that, I would like to see it be like 90% of the public support the work that teachers do. They work hard. Public education is extremely important. We've seen over the past century or even more across North America, people understand the values of the curriculum are really important for affecting social relations. John Dewey said that, the philosopher of education in the United States. Let's develop critically thinking citizens to help with the social problems that may arise and do arise, as we know. The social reconstructionists, the same thing. And there's been conservative forces that want to use the curriculum for their purposes. Maybe that's just to push aside liberal arts and meet the needs of capital, this kind of thing. So it is really important for the members of the public to understand these debates and where they're coming from. And I would like to see more members of the public, a higher percentage, be aware that corporate media have corporate interests. And that's just the way it is. They may want to weaken public education and commodify it.
We'll be right back. Educators and other human service professionals represent an alternative career pathway in society. In return for a stable middle-class livelihood, teachers and many other human service professionals commit themselves to roles that confer great human meaning, but without the opportunity for great wealth. Those who emphasize material success therefore often see such careers as substandard and discourage their children from such livelihoods. For those who value the rewards of service and teaching, however, a life in education can be truly satisfying. All this illustrates that diversity comes in many forms, including the value orientation of individuals. For many of us, the quest for meaning and a career focused on the life of the mind outweighs many other possible rewards. Society is fortunate to have persons of such an orientation to serve in the many roles that do not fit with the vagaries of the marketplace. Let us understand and celebrate our differences. Thank you for watching Your Education Matters.
For more information about this show or to view past episodes, go to the Your Education Matters website at www.youreducationmatters.ca. The views and opinions presented in this program are not necessarily those of all faculties, staff, or administration at SFU.